In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. In today's gospel, we hear about the goats and the sheep, which we recall this gospel reading being read every time of this time of the year, every year. And we, upon listening to it, can think initially that it sounds unfair, that if you didn't give someone drink, you didn't realize that you weren't doing that for God. If you gave someone something to drink, they didn't realize they were doing it for God either. So those who did good things and those who didn't do good things realized at the end that they were doing them or not doing them for Christ. But what is this whole of this gospel reading? What does it say about the judgment? And why is this called Judgment Sunday? Is because we see that Christ references the kingdom of heaven, and people will be separated from the left and the right. And as we know in the church, in the icons, the right is always the favored side, and the left is always the rejected side. As we see in the resurrection icon, as we see in the crucifixion icon, we see that throughout the iconography in the Orthodox Church. But looking at this gospel reading, St. John Chrysostom speaks about what our capabilities are in helping other people. And he says that God doesn't expect us to fix the problem. He doesn't expect us, for those who are sick, and let's take the one visiting the sick when they're in the hospital. Christ doesn't say, I was sick and you healed me, or I was sick and you operated on me, or I was sick and you nursed me back to health. He said, I was sick and you visited me. Now, many times in our lives, we feel, especially when we have someone we have to take care of in their older age or even in their younger age, we feel like we need to fix whatever the problem is with their health. That we have to come in, we have to do exactly everything to change whatever those circumstances are, whether it's an illness, whether it's someone suffering from a death. And many times, we just don't have those tools. We don't have the tools to heal them. We don't even have the tools to understand maybe why someone passed away at a young age, or why someone was suffering so long before they finally went on to be with God. And then in those moments, we feel sometimes that we have to do more than we're actually capable of doing. We have to tinker, or we have to say things that we're not quite sure of theologically, we're not quite sure of in a counseling perspective. And that's really when you hear people say things at funerals, and you hear people say things to people who are sick that become this distorted theology. But it's not, it might be painful to us, but they might not understand that there is something greater that they can do besides just try to make reason or sense of what's going on. And in counseling, there's something called the ministry of presence, which is greatly understood for those who go to do hospital ministry, and also those who do maybe chaplaincy or any type of counseling or therapy, or sitting with someone, a grief counselor. And what that means, the ministry of presence, is just being there, just being present. And being present isn't just sitting down. Being present is actively listening, empathizing, understanding what they're saying to you, and not feeling always that you have to have something to say in return, but just to be there. If you think about any time you've had a suffering in your life, maybe it was a hospital visit, maybe it was a funeral, whatever, and you think of the people who came to be with you, do you remember exactly what they said? Probably not. But you remember that they were there. And their presence there made the difference. If you think of any celebration that you've had, it wasn't necessarily what they said, it was the fact that they were sharing that celebration with you. And St. John says today, St. John Chrysostom says, that don't look at these simple acts as things we have to fix, but just look at them and do what is in our power. And that's a key to understand. Do what is in our power. If we have extra clothing, give it to those who are in need of clothing. If we have food and we see someone who's hungry, give the food to them. If we see someone who's sick or suffering, and it doesn't just have to be in the context of a hospital, it doesn't have to be in a nursing home, but look around in the church. We're all suffering in one way or another. We're all in pain. We're all having struggles and difficulties. What is our responsibility to each other? It might not be for us to just say, well, tell me your problems and I'll fix them. That's not the case. But just to be there and to be kind and to do what is in our power. So we don't have that request from God to say, well, when I was in prison, you made me a cake with a saw in it and you got me out of prison. Or when I was hungry, you completely stocked my refrigerator for the rest of my life. Or when I was naked, you bought me the finest clothing every year. It's not that. It's the touch points that we have. When we see these things, do we sit back and do nothing? Or when we see them, do we actively take an initiative to make a difference? We all have great wealth, even for those of us who think that while we're struggling with our bills, we all have great wealth. When you look at the poorest in America are some of the richest in the world. And when you look at what indigence is, and when you look at some of the countries that don't have food, they don't have clean water, they don't have medications, we have those things. So what can we share with those who don't? And what can we do, especially during this time of Lent, to make a difference in these ways? St. Augustine, in his writing The City of God, says that at judgment in front of God, we will immediately have this 100% recollection of the things that we did that were good and also the things that we did that were bad. And the things that we chose to forget, that we kind of pushed out, that we never repented from, will come flooding back to us, as well as the good things that we may have done that we might have also forgotten. But he says that in that, it's a defining moment for us. It's a defining moment in coming to experience, again, the fullness of the things that we did that were good and the fullness of the things that we did that were wrong. So during this upcoming Lenten season, what does this gospel say to us? This gospel tells us that God is expecting us to do these things. These are basic necessities. And just like every one of us in here has clothing on, you will eat today, you will go to a home, wherever that is, in this town, the next town, wherever, you will go there. You will have all these things. You will drink something today. We all have these basic necessities. Christ in this gospel is not saying anything that is a far-reached plan for us or something that's too difficult to ever comprehend. He's saying, if you see someone with need of these basic necessities, drinking, eating, clothing, human interaction, human kindness, then just do what's in your power. And what's in your power might be 50 cents, it might be a smile, but it always should be a prayer, and it always should be something that we look to do and to share what God has given us, because as we give the things that God has given us, He replenishes us as well. He gives us a greater gift in return. The grace of God that comes to us and lifts us up out of our normal everyday ways and the way we feel. And if you think about if you've done something good for someone, whether it was just random or whatever, you feel good afterwards. Or well, at least I would hope you would. I think everyone should feel some difference. I mean, you see kids who do service projects and do things and they get done and they say, I felt good about doing that. What is that thing that makes you feel good? It's nothing you buy. You can't get it at Walmart. It's something that comes to you from God, that gift from God that is that grace that comes upon us and says, you're doing something that is worthy of a heavenly reward. And that heavenly reward, God doesn't give us in His fullness at the moment, But he gives us a taste of what it is. And that taste should lead us to an appetite to do more. And you say, I want that more. I want that more and more and more. So as you look at the Lenten season, find the opportunities, if you can, to do these things. And most of all, keep your eyes open. If you think of the rich man in the gospel and Lazarus who laid at his gate, and every day the poor Lazarus was at his gate, and he was full of sores, and he was hungry, and he would have eaten the crumbs that fell off the table, but the rich man gave him nothing. Why did the rich man give him nothing? Because he chose to ignore Lazarus. He chose to look past him. And in the end, we see that the rich man is tormented and Lazarus is embraced. But it doesn't require great and extraordinary things beyond our capabilities. It just requires simple, little building blocks of giving of ourselves, giving of our gifts, and sharing with those in need. And those gifts will be multiplied back to us. So if you don't know how to do these things, first of all, keep your eyes open, look around you, because you will find the opportunities to do that. It's just like anyone who's bought a new car, right? When you buy a new car, then you drive down the street in your new car and you look, hey, there's one of my cars. There's the car. I never noticed there were so many cars like mine. Does this ever happen to anybody? Just nod or, okay, good. I don't feel like it's just me. But that happens, and you look and you say, oh, that's what it is. And sometimes you might even get a new coat or a new dress in church, and you look over and you look at, oh, Maria's wearing the same dress as I am. You know, how did that happen? Because you notice what you're wearing or what you're doing. But what happens is you become tuned in to whatever it is that now has become important for you. If you're looking to buy a new home, you don't realize how many homes are for sale until you start looking. So those types of things, as you look for those opportunities, look for the opportunity of giving water or food or clothing or helping or visiting or whatever it is. If you look for those opportunities, you will be surprised how many start showing up. And that is the challenge in the gospel today, is to do those things, because if we ignore them, we will be judged harshly. And remember that everything you do, for those who brought coats and dropped them in the bin in the multi-purpose room, you did that maybe because you had an extra coat. Maybe it was a coat that you kind of liked, but you say, I don't wear it too much anymore. But what you did was you gave that coat to God. That's an extraordinary thing. And it was simple. It was an extra coat, or it was a coat that was worn out. But you gave it to God. And St. Martin, he's a saint who was a soldier. And you'll recall that he was riding on his horse. And he's this valiant soldier. He's also a saint in the church. But he had this red garment, like a cape, that was wrapped around his neck. And he's riding, and he sees this man laying on the street. And this man is naked. So he stops his horse, he gets off his horse, and looks at the man, and he sees that the man is completely naked on the street. So what does he do? He pulls off his cape. He takes his sword out, and he slices his cape in half. And he takes his cape, and he drapes it over the man to cover him, and wraps it around him to cover the man. And then he gets back on his horse, he rides off. Well, St. Martin later that evening went to sleep. And he had a dream, and it was Christ who came to him. And Christ came to him not wearing garments of royalty, but he came wearing the garment that St. Martin had given. He was wrapped in that garment. And that garment, after St. Martin had died, was placed in the church and became a garment. And that's how chaplaincy came out, and because it became the chapel where it was held. And then the one who took care of the garment was the chaplain, and then it became tied in with military and law enforcement and fire. But St. Martin did that and had that vision of that. May we all just give just a little bit of ourselves, what we have in our power, to help those around us. And look for the opportunities, because you will get the reward in the kingdom of heaven. And as St. Paisios says over and over, he says, anytime someone would say something negative or whatever, he say, that's fine. They're putting money in my bank account in heaven. And he would always view heaven as this giant bank account where things were being deposited. All these treasures were being deposited, and he was waiting to receive them in the kingdom of heaven. And we know that he has received them because he's also received the title of saint in our church. But look for the opportunities and realize that the things that you do, you're doing specifically for God himself. Amen.